Ever felt like you knew your school, your town, inside and out? I certainly did. My high school wasn't one of those sprawling, anonymous institutions you see in movies, lost in a concrete suburban jungle. No, ours was a more rural affair, smaller, with a graduating class shy of 200. It was the kind of place where faces became familiar landmarks in the hallways, where you knew names even if you didn't know stories. We prided ourselves on a certain kind of quiet, an uneventful rhythm that in retrospect felt almost like a dare to the universe. Major drama, the kind that makes your breath catch in your throat, that felt like pure fiction, something that happened elsewhere, to other people. Then one day, a silence I'd barely registered, a silence embodied by one particular classmate, shattered that comfortable illusion. It ripped a hole in our perceived reality, revealing a chilling darkness we were unprepared to confront, a darkness that showed our quiet little spot was more fragile than any of us could have imagined. His name, for the sake of this story, was Luke. And Luke was more than just quiet. He was a void, a human question mark drifting through the active, noisy ecosystem of high school. He wasn't an obvious outcast. No strange clothes, no overt declarations of rebellion. He simply wasn't there, even when he was physically present. It was as if he was actively trying to erase himself from sight, one silent, withdrawn day at a time, fading into the background like old wallpaper. This made him an anomaly, and in the predatory setting of adolescence, anomalies often become targets. The main stage for his particular torment was our elective computer class, a room filled with the clunky, oversized box monitors of a slightly bygone era. The layout itself seemed to conspire against him, with long tables and assigned seats that often left him isolated, an island in a sea of chattering peers who naturally gravitated toward their own. It started subtly, as these things often do. A snicker here, a pointed whisper there, primarily from a clique of seniors who seemed to view their impending graduation as a license for casual cruelty. Their jokes centered around Luke's silence, twisting it into something creepy or weird. What began as almost playground-level teasing soon festered, growing barbs, becoming more pointed, more relentless. The teacher, a man who I remember as being a bit of a pushover, someone who seemed more interested in reaching the end of the period than in shaping young minds or critically protecting them, did nothing. His passivity was a green light, an unspoken permission for the torment to escalate. I'd watch Luke during these moments. He rarely reacted overtly. No outbursts, no tears, not even a direct glare. But you could see the toll it took in the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw, the way his shoulders seemed to sink a fraction further, the brief hunted flicker that would cross his eyes before the mask of indifference slammed back down. Each taunt was another small chip at an already eroding foundation. And then came a day that, at the time, felt like a minor deviation, a small ripple in the routine. School had just let out, the usual chaotic exodus of students flooding the parking lot. I was walking to my car. An early birthday meant I had my license and a beat-up sedan before many of my junior classmates when I saw him. Luke. He was sitting on a curb a little way from the school, looking utterly adrift, a solitary figure against the backdrop of departing buses and laughing groups. Our town wasn't exactly built for pedestrians. Walking home wasn't a common option if you didn't live exceptionally close. Something, some impulse I still can't fully define, maybe a twinge of guilt for my own inaction in that computer class, maybe just basic human decency, made me pull over. "What's up?" I asked, trying for casual. "Need a ride?" The transformation was startling. His head snapped up, eyes wide, and for a moment he just stared, as if the offer was in a foreign language. Then a small, hesitant yes escaped him. The relief, the sheer gratitude that washed over his face was almost painful to witness. It was the expression of someone chronically ignored, suddenly seen. The car ride was only about 10 minutes, but it felt like crossing a significant boundary. He guided me to his house, and as we drove, the silence that usually enveloped him began to crack. He spoke in hushed, fragmented sentences at first, then with a growing, almost desperate urgency. It wasn't just the seniors in computer class, he confessed. It was more pervasive, a relentless, suffocating pressure he felt in multiple classes from multiple directions. He didn't name names or detail specific incidents beyond what I'd seen, but his words painted a bleak picture of a soul slowly being worn down, of being relentlessly hunted in the supposed sanctuary of his own life. I told him rather unhelpfully in retrospect to just ignore them, that they were deadbeats. His response was unsettling. He didn't just agree or disagree. He said something about being sick of it all, a weariness that went bone deep, hinting at a detachment from normal emotional responses, a dangerous resignation that sent a faint, almost imperceptible chill down my spine. A few days later, Luke's usual seat in computer class was empty. It was a small anomaly, easily missed in the pre-class chatter, but given our recent conversation, it registered with me, a tiny blip on my internal radar. Little did I know that this minor absence was the prelude to a full-blown event of terror. The period was dragging on, the click of keyboards a monotonous soundtrack to another mundane afternoon. Then the intercom crackled, not with the usual announcements about bake sales or football practice, but with the principal's voice, stark and stripped of its customary calm. "Lockdown. This is not a drill." Those 5 words. They cut through the air like a razor, instantly silencing the room, transforming casual boredom into a thick, palpable dread. Our teacher, the same one who'd been so passive in the face of Luke's bullying, now looked genuinely terrified. Her face went pale and she fumbled with the keys to lock the door, her hands visibly shaking. She hissed at us to get into the corner, away from the door, away from the windows. The usual nervous giggles that accompanied drills were absent. This was different. This felt horribly, undeniably real. We huddled together, a mass of suddenly very young, very scared teenagers. The silence in the classroom was oppressive, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart and the distant growing wail of police sirens. Time stretched, becoming elastic and distorted. Minutes felt like hours. Then another announcement from the principal, his voice even more strained. Someone in a mask, carrying a black duffel bag, had been spotted trying to enter the school. A duffel bag. Such an ordinary object, yet in that moment, in that context, it became a symbol of pure, unadulterated menace. Every terrible news headline, every parent's unspoken worst nightmare, suddenly felt condensed into that one chilling image, and it was potentially just outside our door. The lockdown eventually ended. Police swarmed the school, a chaotic scene of controlled urgency. The school day was cut short, and we were released into the anxious arms of our parents, or, in my case, to the relative quiet of my own home. I spent the evening replaying the day's events, an unsettling film loop in my mind. The fear, the uncertainty, Luke's absence, it all swirled together into a murky unease. I eventually fell into a fitful sleep, only to be jolted awake hours later by a sound that didn't belong. A light, persistent tapping at my bedroom window. My room was on the ground floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. For a moment, I was paralyzed, caught between the dregs of sleep and a surge of primal fear. Slowly, cautiously, I moved towards the window, peering through a gap in the blinds. A silhouette. Someone was out there. Then the figure shifted slightly, and the faint moonlight caught a familiar face. Luke. It was a scene ripped from a nightmare. The person who, by now, I instinctively suspected was at the heart of the day's terror, now standing just inches away, separated only by a thin pane of glass. My breath hitched. I slid the window open a mere crack, my voice a shaky whisper. "Luke, what are you doing? How did you even find me?" He looked wild-eyed, disheveled, a stark, terrifying contrast to the withdrawn boy I knew. His words tumbled out raw and immediate. It was me, he breathed, his voice hoarse. I caused it. The lockdown. I tried to do something bad. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The masked figure, the duffel bag, Luke's absence. It was him. The quiet kid, the one no one really saw, had brought our entire school to its knees. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. A strange residual pity for the tormented boy he'd been, now slammed against the stark, terrifying reality of the young man standing outside my window. Self-preservation screamed at me. "What were you going to do?" I managed, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer directly, instead launching into an explanation of how he'd found my house. He recounted remembering a throwaway comment I'd made weeks ago about a local deli I lived near. After the lockdown, after whatever plans he'd had were thwarted, he'd apparently biked through the surrounding neighborhoods, systematically, street by street, car by car, until he recognized mine parked in the driveway. It wasn't just determination. It felt chillingly like an obsession, a disturbing level of focus fueled by whatever dark current was driving him. This revelation, the casual recounting of what amounted to stalking, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Then came the plea, the one that solidified my terror. "Can I come in? I need to talk. I need to tell you what I planned on doing." The invitation hung in the cold night air, heavy with unspoken horrors. What unspeakable things was he about to make known? What monstrous contents had that duffel bag held? My mind, already reeling, conjured images I couldn't voice, a darkness I instinctively knew I had to keep on the other side of that glass. The boy I'd offered a ride to, the one who had seemed so grateful for a moment of connection, was now asking to share a burden I was terrified to even glimpse. Every instinct screamed no. This wasn't a cry for help I could answer, not anymore. This was something far beyond my ability to handle, something that belonged in the hands of people equipped to deal with such fractured realities. "No, Luke," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "You can't come in, and I can't hear what you planned. You need to, you need to go to the school or the police and tell them." He just stared, his face a mask of despair. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stayed rooted to the spot outside my window. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats and broken trust. He had chosen me, the one person who had shown him a fleeting moment of kindness, as his confessor. But that kindness couldn't and wouldn't excuse the abyss he had clearly approached, and perhaps even teetered on the edge of. The weight of his desperate, misplaced confidence was crushing, but the potential, unimaginable outcomes of his actions were even heavier. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone what I had to do. When he still refused to leave, I did the only thing I could think of. I yelled "Dad" as loudly as I could. It worked. Luke flinched, then melted back into the shadows and was gone. I scrambled to my parents' room, waking them with my panicked, jumbled story. My mom, her face a mixture of fear and resolve, was the one who insisted on calling the police straight away. The conversation with the dispatcher, then with the officers who arrived at our door in the dead of night, was a blur. I recounted everything: the lockdown, Luke's appearance, his confession, his disturbing ability to find me. The police were already aware of the day's events, of course, and my information about Luke's identity seemed to galvanize them. I heard later that officers were dispatched to his house that night, but he wasn't there. The news of his initial evasion added another layer of tension to an already fraught situation. It wasn't until the next day, reports claimed, that he was either found or perhaps simply returned home, a ghost surrendering to the inevitable. The immediate acute danger was over, but a different, more insidious kind of unease began to settle in, not just for me, but for our entire community. The days that followed were strange. The school tried to project an image of normalcy, of resilience, but the undercurrent of fear and uncertainty was palpable. Official statements were issued, Counseling was offered, but nothing could truly erase the chilling events of that day. Whispers and rumors flew like wildfire through the student body. What exactly had Luke planned? What was really in that duffel bag? Some said it was loaded with weapons. Others speculated it was just an elaborate, terrifying scare tactic. The truth, as it often is, remained murky, caught somewhere between official reports and frightened speculation. The school administration attempted to restore calm, but you can't unring that kind of alarm bell. The sense of safety, once taken for granted, had been irrevocably damaged. We learned that Luke had been charged with making a terroristic threat. The legal jargon felt strangely sanitized, a clinical description for the raw, visceral fear he had managed to inflict on hundreds of people. As I processed this, my feelings remained a tangled mess. There was a lingering pity for the quiet, tormented boy who had been systematically bullied day after day with no one stepping in to help. Yet that pity was now irrevocably intertwined with the stark, undeniable horror of his actions, the realization of the danger he had posed. My one small act of kindness, offering him a ride, had somehow, inexplicably, drawn me into the periphery of a potential catastrophe. Did my gesture give him a false sense of alliance, a mistaken belief that I would condone or conceal his darkness? Or was he simply grasping, in his profound despair, at any flicker of human connection, however tenuous? These were questions that would haunt me, questions without easy answers. Luke was apprehended, and the legal system began its slow process. But the incident left deep scars on our small community, and on me. It served as a brutal reminder of the deceptive nature of quiet surfaces, how an ordinary place, a place you think you know, can become the stage for extraordinary fear. The illusion of our uneventful, safe little area had been shattered, replaced by a more somber view of the difficulties and darknesses that can exist just beneath the veneer of normalcy. The story of Luke is a stark illustration of the danger of invisible suffering, the explosive potential of unchecked torment, and how easily a young person can be driven to the edge. He was a boy whose silence was, in reality, a desperate, unheard scream, a scream that finally manifested in a way that forced everyone to listen. But the questions he raised by his actions, by his dissent, still linger, echoing in the quiet corners of my memory. How many others walk around, their own silences masking storms of pain, their unheard cries building towards an unknown breaking point? What part do we all play, knowingly or unknowingly, in the stories that unfold around us, in the tragedies averted and those that are not? The truth is, the quietest people can carry the loudest storms inside. And sometimes, tragically, those storms break free, leaving devastation in their wake, and a chilling reminder that we must learn to listen more closely to the silence.